We are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and today we're breaking down the fight card that has been a huge talking point for many MMA fans over the last week or so due to the quality of the fighters on the card. Firstly, I'm always happy for fight nights, I never discriminate. And secondly, when you actually look at the main card fighters, Marvin Vettori, Karl Roberson, Merab Dvalishvili, Borg, Fili, Charles Jourdain, the main event, Cynthia, Calvillo, Jessica, it honestly isn't that bad at all in my opinion. As for MMAPlay365, we're coming off yet another winning week. The official bets profited once again, although like an idiot I forgot to track the Alex Perez bet, but it was all documented in the MMAPlay365 hub, and I sent a screenshot out of the bet slip on Twitter too. You know, I always pride myself with being legit. Anyway, we also cashed one of the pre-made parlays in the Fun Gamblers section. We had a subscriber send us a bet slip of his nice 3-leg parlay win as well, so that was cool to see. And as we look to keep that winning ball rolling, we're about to break down some fights. And in the main event, we've got Jessica versus Cynthia Calvillo. Jessica currently the minus 115 favourite, with the comeback on Cynthia Calvillo, the slight minus 105 underdog. And in regards to where the line is and the value on each line, again, I say it most weeks, it's one of these types of fights where if you've got a strong lean each way after watching tape and studying the fights, then I think this fight is playable on either side. I think there could be value on either side, like I say, if your read is strong. And for where the line moves during fight week, I'm not sure if it moves too much. I would be surprised to see any sort of steam either way in this fight. I think it's lined pretty fairly. But if I'm honest, I was expecting Cynthia Calvillo to be the favourite, albeit again a slight favourite, so it wasn't a total shock to see her as an underdog, but I was expecting her to sort of be minus 115, minus 120. So overall, that's where I see the line. There are my thoughts and my expectations. Moving on to the fight itself, breaking that down, I think stylistically it's actually a pretty interesting fight because we've got Jessica who's predominantly a striker, fighting Cynthia Calvillo, who's predominantly the grappler. So it's going to be really interesting to see who is dominant inside the cage, who is able to get their game going. The one thing I will say from Calvillo's perspective, and there's an argument for Jessica as well, and I'll move on to that also, is that Calvillo has improved her striking a lot lately. You know, she spent a lot of time over at Tiger Muay Thai, working with the likes of Loma Lookboonmee, so you can only imagine the things that she's learning from her in regards to striking technique and ability. But then, like I say, you could also argue the other way as well. Jessica has got better over the years with her grappling and, you know, staying safe on the mat, being competitive, that sort of thing. So there's definitely improvements on both sides on the, you know, sort of the weaknesses in mixed martial arts, but I feel that Calvillo's improvement in her weaknesses, so the striking, been a lot greater than the improvements we've seen from Jessica. I feel that Calvillo is almost turning into a very well-rounded fighter, and yes, she's got room for improvement on the striking for sure, but she's so much better than what she was when she first came into the UFC. You know, she's comfortable on her feet. Yes, she couldn't get Courtney Casey down in that fight, but she won a decision based on striking, and before that fight you might have said that Courtney Casey was the better striker, and if it stayed on the feet she'd win, but that wasn't the case. So definitely the improvements for Calvillo. I'm also really interested to see the size difference between these two ladies as well, because you've got Cynthia Calvillo, who's normally a 115er, albeit she's missed weight a couple of times, and that's why she's moving up to 125. But Jessica used to fight at 135, she's coming back down to 125. So it's really a blown up 115er versus a small 135er. So I'm really interested to see how they both look side by side. I actually think, though, that Cynthia Calvillo will benefit from this move up in weight. I think she's going to look a lot better. I think she's going to be healthier. And it's not as if she ever had like gas tank problems or anything before, but I just think her performance is going to reflect in, you know, moving up in weight and not having to cut all that weight, because she did cut a lot of weight. Like I said, she missed weight a couple of times, so that's no secret. But yeah, I think Calvillo is going to benefit from this for sure. You hear constantly a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, moving up in weight, she's going to be the smaller fighter. Can she perform? I say it time and time again. Look at guys like Robert Whittaker. Look at Kelvin Gastelum, Darren Till. The list goes on and on and on of fighters that have moved up in weight and just absolutely looked amazing because of that move up, because they're healthier, because there's a lack of weight cut. So don't be surprised if we see the same thing in Cynthia Calvillo in this fight. And I feel that the smaller cage as well at the apex also favours Calvillo. I'm sure you can guess right now, I am going to be picking Calvillo to win this fight. The smaller cage is interesting though because Calvillo doesn't have to cover as much distance to shoot takedowns. The takedowns, again, have never really been too bad. She can chain wrestle also. But working over at AKA with guys like DC and the other great wrestlers they've got in that camp, again, I don't need to list them all. I think that that's only going to improve her wrestling as well. And I think she's going to be able to take Jessica Rai down. I think the 5 rounds also favours Calvillo because you look at her last fight against Marina Rodriguez, and this is something I really want to talk about because super impressed with what I saw in that fight. So she goes out there, she gets beat up quite badly in round 1, close round 1 albeit, comes out in round 2 against Marina Rodriguez, takes an even bigger beating, hurt to the body, and as she goes to the corner at the end of round 2, you're thinking, well, this is going to be a whitewash because in this 3rd round, after the beating she's taken round 2 and round 1, she's going to be done in round 3. Her corner says to her, Cynthia, we need this. She replies, coach, I've got this. She goes back out in round 3 and dominates Marina Rodriguez, takes her down and absolutely dominates that round. That is an elite mentality. To lose that badly in rounds 1 and 2, to then go out in round 3 and take that 3rd round in the way she did, super impressed. So I do like Cynthia Calvillo in this fight. On the flip side though, for Jessica Rai, she's got to keep this fight vertical. We've seen time and time again her getting taken down. She can get back up, she can hang on the mat and remain competitive, but the problem that Jessica Rai has is after she's got back up and she's taken down again, once she's settled on the mat, it's almost like she's mentally aware of what's going on and that she's struggling to get back up, and then she starts accepting position. Then it turns into 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 120 seconds on the mat, on her back, and at that point she's losing minutes, she's losing rounds. It's not a good look. I actually think Calvillo is probably one of the best grapplers as well that she's faced, so she's got to keep this fight vertical. If she can keep this fight vertical, I think she is the better striker. I don't think it's leaps and bounds better, but she is a better striker. If you said to me this was a K1 fight over 5 rounds, then you would be favouring Jessica Rai for sure. So, like I say, it's that striker versus grappler matchup, but I think that Calvillo is going to be a lot bigger, a lot healthier in herself at this weight class. I think the smaller cage helps her. I think she's going to be able to get takedowns, and it wouldn't surprise me to see her sub Jessica Rai as well. Like I say, a grappling and submission game is so slick, so good. If she doesn't get that submission though, she needs a takedown or 2 in 3 rounds out of the 5, which again, I can see her getting to win a decision. So I'm picking Cynthia Calvillo to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the rebooked Karl Roberson versus Marvin Vettori. Obviously, these guys were supposed to fight a few weeks ago. Karl Roberson missed weight, was deemed by the doctor after that unable to fight. Marvin Vettori has had multiple cancelled fights lately, so obviously he wasn't happy. Saw Karl Roberson in the hotel lobby. Those two were going at it. Marvin Vettori again, very, very angry at the whole situation, but they've rebooked it. We've got Marvin Vettori, the -220 favourite, the comeback on Karl Roberson at +180. The value for me is on the underdog once again. Karl Roberson was the underdog last time, but it is interesting that Roberson is actually a bigger underdog this time than he was last time. He was sitting about +130 when I broke this fight down last time. I think the fight just plays out closer than the line suggests, I really do. But I do think the additional steam on Marvin Vettori is down to what we saw last time with the missed weight. Vettori actually looked really good making weight. On the opposite side, Roberson looked really bad. Then obviously Vettori's going to be fired up even more this time around. So I do feel that all that factors into the wider line this time. But like I say, I think the value is on the underdog. In regards to where the line goes, I think that it could come in a little bit closer to Fight Night, Marvin Vettori at -220. I think we see that dip back under the -200 mark. So obviously, Karl Roberson might end up being sort of +160 or +165 in that spot. So that's where I think the line goes. In regards to actually who I think is going to win the fight, the last time I broke this down, I did pick Karl Roberson winning a close decision. But I'm actually going to switch my pick this time, And I think this is almost like what we're seeing, like as I've just mentioned, in reflection of the betting lines as well. I just feel that Marvin Vettori looked really, really good on the weigh-ins. He looked healthy, he looked ready to go, and Karl Roberson didn't. Now Karl Roberson's going to have to weigh in again just a few weeks later, cut all that weight again. I have no idea what was going on, why he missed weight last time. Maybe he had some sort of illness going on, but it's not good that if he struggled cutting weight once a few weeks ago, now he has to do it again. And even though I do think the fight, like I've already mentioned, plays out much closer than the line suggests, I do think that Marvin Vettori, again in this small cage, I think he's going to be able to close the distance a little bit quicker now. He might be able to take away the biggest strength that Roberson has, and that's his accurate kicks, his accurate punches. If Vettori can close that distance, bully him, push him against the cage, grind it out, I think Vettori's game plan is almost easier inside a smaller cage than what it is a bigger cage. And I just feel that even though both fighters are very close in skill set, where Vettori is going to be better in this fight is going to be in Roberson's face, pushed up, clinch, maybe some takedown attempts. And if he can get on top of Roberson as well, I do think he's going to have an advantage there. Obviously, that smaller cage allows that extra action. It allows that distance to be closed quicker. It allows that takedown to come that bit easier as well. So with all that said, as I've mentioned, I think the value is definitely on Karl Roberson at plus 180. I do think the fight is still going to be relatively close, but I am picking Marvin Vettori to win. And in the next fight, I can't wait for this one. It's a wrestler's dream. So anybody that knows me well knows that I'm going to love this fight. We've got Merab Dvalishvili versus Ray Borg. Merab Dvalishvili currently the minus 360 favourite with the comeback on Ray Borg at plus 300. In regards to value, I don't see any value straight here, but I think that Merab Dvalishvili is rightfully a minus 360 favourite. And I probably wouldn't have been saying this if this fight was before the Ray Borg and Ricky Simone fight. But the one thing I was really surprised about is how easy it was for Ricky Simone to take Borg down and hold him down. I think Merab Dvalishvili is a better wrestler, got greater pressure. So I'm not surprised that Dvalishvili is this big of a favourite. Having said that, I do think that the line will close up a little bit closer to fight night, and we'll see that throughout the week. I think I'd be very, very surprised to see this hit the minus 400 mark. I think it'll end up closer to minus 300 than it will minus 400 for sure. So yeah, I do think there's going to be money coming in on Ray Borg slow and steadily through fight week and then leading into fight night. As for how the fight plays out, I have touched upon it already. I was really surprised with the lack of takedown defense from Ray Borg against Ricky Simone. You know, Ricky Simone was able to take him down at will, and he kept him down as well, which is something Ricky Simone never really did in previous fights. So it does give you a bit of concern that if Ricky Simone is able to keep Ray Borg down, then you've got to think that Merab will be able to keep Ray Borg down as well. I think even though Merab lost to Ricky Simone in their fight, you know, Merab was winning pretty much every minute of that fight, and ultimately the unfortunate situation happened at the end where Dvalishvili went out but then came back and ended up losing that fight. But I think Dvalishvili is a guy that can definitely hit the top 10 in this division. I'm really, really high on him. I think he's a solid fighter. He's getting better each time we see him. And the pace and pressure that he puts on, I say this every time I break his fights down, he's just like no other. There is no other fighter that can put that type of pace, that pressure, that relentless ability to take you down, the relentless ability to just keep moving forward. And he's just an absolute nightmare to deal with inside the cage. And if Ray Borg dropped a fight against Ricky Simone, I think for sure he's going to drop this fight to Merab Dvalishvili. I think that Dvalishvili has got to be careful though in regards to the striking of Borg, because Borg's striking looked good against Ricky Simone. You know, it very much improved. Everyone, including myself, was saying that Ricky Simone will be the better striker, but that wasn't the case. If it wasn't for the takedowns of Simone, he would have lost that fight. So Merab does have to be careful, but he's got good striking himself, and again, that's an area that he's improving each time. I think the striking is going to be close in this fight, but just Merab pushing Borg back constantly, getting him against the cage, taking him down. I think we can see a rinse and repeat for the takedowns and the wrestling. If he needs to, obviously he'll stay on top if Borg can't get back up, but you know, worst case scenario for Merab, Borg keeps getting back up, Merab just keeps taking him down. You know, they call him the machine for a reason. I do think it's a good fight for Dvalishvili, so I'm going to be picking him to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another fun one. We've got Fili versus Charles Jourdain. Fili currently the -225 favourite. The comeback on Jourdain at +185. Now, I was actually quite surprised with this line because I feel that after Jourdain knocked out Choi in the performance that he put on in that fight, I know he was dropped a couple of times early on. I honestly thought that the line would be much closer than this. The bookies normally don't really like Fili either. A lot of Fili's fights, he's either an underdog or a slight favourite at best. So very, very surprised that this line was as wide as what it is. I think that there's value on the underdog for now. I think if the line keeps getting shorter, I think if Fili comes under the -200 mark, then that value will start shrinking for Jourdain. And then if it hits -175, for example, I think the value would then flip onto the favourite in Fili. But right now at +185, I do think the value is on Jourdain. And where do I think the line moves? Well, I feel that it might dip under that -200 that I spoke about, but I don't know how much shorter it gets after that. So I do think that money will come on Jourdain is basically what I'm trying to say, but maybe not too much more. Where I see the fight going, how I see it playing out, it's a really, really good fight. I think the matchmaking's perfect in this one. It's going to be exciting on the feet, and I think the majority of this fight takes place on the feet as well. I just feel that Fili is that little bit better than Charles Jourdain everywhere in this fight, and that's key. And I think that's why he's going to win. I think the striking, although Jourdain's got really good striking, you have to have good striking if, you're knocking guys like Duo Choi out. But Fili, his striking's good. He was hanging with Sadiq Youssef, who is one of the best strikers, one of the most powerful strikers in the division. So I think that speaks volumes. He was landing against him. He knocked Shaman Marias out. And alongside that, he's just been around in the UFC for so long, longer than a lot of people realize as well. And because of that, the experience he's got, level of opponents that he's fought over the years, much greater experience than Charles Jourdain. I think all this is going to be a factor in this fight. I think it's all going to play a part. But Fili, if it's not going right for him on the feet, again, he's got underrated wrestling. He's got good takedowns. He's got good jiu-jitsu. He can lose position from time to time. But if it's not going right on the feet for him against Jourdain, he's got that plan B of change levels, drop down, take Jourdain down. And I think that's where the biggest gap in skill is in this fight. I think it's on the mat. On the feet, although I do favour Fili still, I think Jourdain will make it extremely competitive. Jourdain's a really dynamic striker. He comes in at good angles. He can switch stances. He's good with his hands. He's good with his kicks. He's got cardio as well, so he'll be able to keep going. Also, the guy's got comeback ability. The guy's got a good mentality. As I've already mentioned, he got dropped a couple of times against Duo Choi, and that was in Duo Choi's backyard as well. He managed to come back in that fight and finish Duo Choi. It was unbelievable how he managed to do that. So, you've got to give it up to Jourdain for being able to come back in that situation, in that spot, and finish a guy like Choi. I like Jourdain. I think he's a good fighter. I just think this might be a tiny little bit too much for him. If he wins, I won't be shocked though. It's not one of those whitewashers. As I've already mentioned, I just think Fili is that little bit better everywhere in this fight, and he does have a plan B, whereas if it's not going great for Jourdain on the feet, I don't think he can start level changing and trying to take Fili down, because I just feel Fili's better there. So I'm going to take Fili to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jourdain Espinosa versus Mark De La Rosa. Espinosa currently the -155 favourite. The comeback on De La Rosa at +135. I think the value's on the favourite in this fight in Jourdain Espinosa. It wouldn't have shocked me to see him up to -200. I think that would have been very, very slim pickings when you're talking about value if he was up at that line. But yeah, I do think the line could and probably should be a little bit wider. For where the line goes, I'm not too sure, because I expected the line to keep moving up. He opened a -225 favourite, dropped straight back down to the -160 range. That early money came in on Mark De La Rosa, but it's kept coming down, and was, like I say, we're at sort of -155. So it wouldn't shock me for it to come up at all, but like I say, I've been surprised so far with the money coming in on De La Rosa. I think De La Rosa's in a very, very tough spot in this fight, because ultimately he's lost 3 on the bounce. If he loses this one, he's likely going to be getting his walking papers. I never really like to talk too much about that, but the reality is what I've just said. And I'm just not sure where he beats Espinosa in this fight, because the obvious gap in skill is if Mark De La Rosa can get on top. It's the jiu-jitsu, but only when De La Rosa's on top, because I don't think De La Rosa's got great jiu-jitsu off his back. He's not strong enough there. He doesn't attack too much. He doesn't try to get back up to his feet too much. But if he managed to get Jourdain Espinosa down and he stayed on top and he was able to work, I think that's going to be trouble for Espinosa. And I ultimately feel that's the reason that's keeping this betting line from being up to -200 like I spoke about. Because Espinosa makes a lot of mistakes on the mat against good jiu-jitsu guys, which is what De La Rosa is. That's where his strength is. If he's able to get a takedown and get Espinosa on his back, then this fight, it could end up going the other way. Mark De La Rosa could end up winning, but De La Rosa doesn't shoot that many takedowns. He's the classic case of a jiu-jitsu guy that doesn't wrestle. Sure, he shoots one or two here and there, but it's nowhere near enough. And the fact is, he should be shooting takedowns more, because he's getting beat in striking battles by strikers when he should be looking to take them down and relentlessly trying to take them down. It's just a strange one, and that's where I feel Espinosa wins this fight, because I don't think De La Rosa shoots many takedowns in this fight. If he does, I'm not totally convinced he'll get Espinosa down. Espinosa does have a high school wrestling background. He has been taken down though, but it's guys like Alex Perez, again a good wrestler. I'm just not sure Mark De La Rosa can take him down, which leaves a striking battle on the feet. And I think Espinosa is more athletic. I think his striking is more dynamic. His speed is evidently going to be greater in this fight. I think his volume is going to be greater. He's going to be moving in and out of range. I think it's going to frustrate De La Rosa. De La Rosa isn't actually a bad striker either. I haven't spoken about his striking yet. I've only spoken about him predominantly being a jiu-jitsu guy, but he isn't a bad striker. Where he comes short though is where he can't get his punches off first. When he comes into strike, if he's getting hit before he's landing himself, it sort of seems to throw him off his game, throw him off rhythm, and he has to back off, reset and start again. And then if he comes again and gets beaten to the punch again first, that's the pattern he falls into where he loses fights. And I see that pattern playing out in this fight as well. I think he's going to come into Espinosa, and Espinosa is either not going to be there to be hit, or he'll have landed and moved back out of range again. So I think the speed, the movement is going to play a big factor in this fight for Espinosa. And I just think he's going to be the better fighter on the night, unless De La Rosa can get takedowns. But I'm not convinced at all that he's going to, like I said, that he's going to shoot many takedowns. And if he does, I'm not convinced he's going to take Espinosa down. So I'm going to take Jourdain Espinosa to win this fight. And in the next fight, the newest fight to be announced, we've got Hannah Cifers versus Mariya Agapova. Mariya Agapova currently sitting at -160. With the comeback on Hannah Cifers at +140. A real interesting one, because Agapova actually opened a -265 favourite. So a lot of money has come back in on Cifers. And I do kind of get it, because I think the fight plays out closer than that -265 line for sure. But I do now think that there's value on Agapova at -160. Like I say, I think -265 was quite wide. I was probably expecting closer to -200, but with it being -160, I feel the value is on Agapova. As for where the line moves, I think you can make an argument either way. I think you can make an argument that more money comes in on Agapova right now. Other people might be seeing this value. But on the flip side, Hannah Cifers is the experienced fighter in this fight, fighting a debutant. So you could make the argument that there's more money going to be coming back on her. As for how the fight plays out, I actually prefer this fight for Agapova. She was supposed to be fighting Melissa Gatto, who's a grappler, and obviously we would have had a nice striker versus grappler moment there, but I feel that she would have ran through Melissa Gatto. I've watched tape on her a few times, not sold on her at all at this level. I think it was a bad matchup for her against Agapova. But against Hannah Cifers, I think it's a good fight for Cifers as well, because she's not facing a Mackenzie Dern where one mistake will get you submitted, where you're fighting probably the most decorated Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist in women's MMA. She's fighting Agapova, who is another striker just like herself, and that's what makes this fight better for me, because I feel that it's a better fight for Agapova because it's going to be more competitive, and I feel it's a good fight for Cifers because, again, it's a fight where she's going to be able to get her own game going and not having to be worried about takedowns. And after taping Agapova, I actually like Agapova a lot as a fighter. The issue is for her, and this is something that I think Cifers could take advantage of, is I still feel that she's quite green. She is developing for sure, but she is only 8-1. She's only been in America for a year training at American Top Team. Like I say, the development is 100% there. She will be looking better each time out, but right now she is quite green, lacks a little bit of experience. Whereas Hannah Cifers, 10-5 record, she's heading into a 6th fight in the UFC. She definitely has that experience edge over Agapova. And how they've matched up stylistic, like I say, it's good. Hannah Cifers, she's a powerful girl, really strong. I think Mackenzie Dern was very surprised with how strong she was when she fought. You know, she couldn't outmuscle her in the clinch and take her down like she's been able to do with other women. So she's got power, she's got strength, she has nice low kicks, she's got movement and good movement too. But the problem is for Cifers in regards to that is it doesn't last very long. So she does slow down and become a little more static the longer the fight goes on. And that's where I see Agapova having her success in this fight, because I think she's going to be a little nervous coming in. I think we're going to see Hannah Cifers look better at the start of the fight. She might even take round one, but I think Agapova's the type of fighter that's strong mentally, that is better technically when it comes to her striking. You know, she's got a good Muay Thai game, good elbows, good kicks. She's good on the outside, she's good on the inside. She can fight forwards, she can fight moving backwards. And I think the longer this fight goes on, the more she builds into the fight. I think she is going to come into her own in this fight, and I can see her taking rounds 2 and 3. So I'm going to take Mariya Agapova to beat Hannah Cifers. And in the next fight, we've got another quick turnaround. We've got Charles Rosa versus Kevin Aguilar. Kevin Aguilar currently the -160 favourite. The comeback on Rosa at +140. I think the value's on the favourite in this fight with Kevin Aguilar. I do think the line could be a little bit higher, maybe up to the -175, -180 mark. So it's not a million miles off, but I do feel that there's value on Aguilar. For where the line goes, again, we're seeing it dropping down a little bit, so it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Aguilar get to -150, but I'm not sure if it gets any lower than that, to be honest. I'd be surprised if it did, but on the same token, I would be surprised if it did go up to the -175, -180 line. I just feel that if it gets to that sort of line, there'll be money coming back in on Charles Rosa, bringing that line down and shortening it up. So that's where I see the line moving over fight week leading into fight night. As for how these guys match up, you know, I've never really been massively high on either guy. You know, Aguilar is not a bad fighter. He's good fundamentally. He does some nice things inside the cage. He's solid. He's got a good record. He's 17 and 3. I just feel like I've just been a little underwhelmed by him since he came into the UFC. And I think with the hype that he had on him coming in, probably was a detriment to my thoughts on him, because I was expecting more. Charles Rosa, on the other hand, again, never somebody that's really excited me. You know, he does good things, again, just like Aguilar, except he does good things on the mat, whereas Aguilar's predominantly a striker. And that's ultimately what we've got in this fight. We've got striker versus grappler yet again. And the problem that I've got with the grappler in Charles Rosa is something that I say all the time. I've already mentioned it a couple of times in this podcast, is the dude just doesn't shoot enough takedowns. He did 5 or 6 years ago, but I think 5 or 6 years ago his striking was much greener, so he relied heavily on the grappling to make up for what he was lacking in the striking. But in all fairness to Charles Rosa, over the years he has improved his striking, so I do think that now he's a better striker than what he once was. He doesn't have to rely on that grappling as much, because he can hang with good guys in the UFC. You know, he went 2.5 rounds with Burgos before he was knocked out and didn't look too bad. So he's just not wrestling as much as what he should, and I feel that it's going to cost him this fight if he doesn't. But even if he does get his wrestling going, Kevin Aguilar's not an easy fighter to take down. And that's proved just from the Enrique Barzola fight. Enrique Barzola has completed 42 takedowns in the UFC, and he's taken down every single opponent that he's faced apart from Kevin Aguilar. So I think that's testament to Aguilar. And he also had to defend 8 takedowns in that fight as well, by the way. It's not as if Barzola wasn't shooting at him. So he's got good takedown defense. And he's also a decent grappler as well. We know that because Dan Ige managed to take Aguilar down. Aguilar managed to take Dan Ige down as well. There were a lot of grappling exchanges in that fight. And Dan Ige is one of the best MMA grapplers in that division, in my opinion. So if Aguilar is stuffing takedowns from Barzola, if he's hanging on the mat with Dan Ige, then I think he's going to be fighting against Charles Rosa. And I actually think the smaller cage would normally help the grappler and the wrestler. But I think in this situation, it favours Aguilar, because the one knock that I have in Aguilar's game is his volume's quite low at times. He takes time off in fights, and again, he's just not as busy and active as you want him to be. But in a smaller cage, it's going to force that action. So I actually think that's going to help Aguilar, because I think if he is more violent, I think if he is more aggressive, it turns him into a better fighter, because his striking is good. So unless Rosa really does come out in this fight, manages to take him down and hold him down, I just don't see him winning. So I'm going to take Kevin Aguilar to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Julia Avila versus Gina Mazany. Avila currently the -460 favourite. The comeback on Mazany at +365. I don't see any value in Julia Avila playing her straight. Even if you wanted to play her in a parlay, it's possible, but there's limited value at that. Where the line goes, again, I do feel that I'd be surprised if it went to minus 500 in this spot. I could see some money coming back on Gina Mazany, because if Mazany ended up at plus 400, the value then switches over to her indefinitely, because although I don't think the fight is going to be relatively close, plus 400 would be a very, very wide number. So for that reason, I do think the line comes down. I don't think it comes down astronomically, though. Maybe we see Julia Avila at minus 400 at best. Now, how these match up, really interesting, because Gina Mazany is going to need to close the distance in this fight, get a hold of Avila and take her down. But I think that's going to be easier said than done, because Avila's striking is really, really good. It's crisp, it's accurate, and she actually packs some power as well. You know, she will piece Mazany up at range. Even when Mazany's coming in, I think she'll piece her up coming in as well. I think she'll put some damage on her. I think there's a possibility of her even finishing her as well. But if Mazany does close that distance and get a hold of Avila, Avila's also got good Muay Thai. She's good inside clinch range. She's got good elbows. She's got good knees. I just feel that she's better everywhere she needs to be before that takedown happens. So she's going to be better than Mazany at distance, at kicking range. She's going to be better than Mazany in boxing range. I think she's going to be better than Mazany in the clinch. And therefore, I feel that it's going to be a very difficult task for Mazany to not only get a read on Avila, but then start working out some entries into takedowns and then actually shooting the takedowns themselves. If she doesn't complete a takedown in the open, she's going to be pushed back to the cage, and then she's got to work that clinch. I just think that she has got a bit of a mountain to climb here. It's not impossible, but I just don't see her getting it done. So I'm going to take Julia Avila to win this fight. And next up, we've got Ryan Benoit versus Tyson Nam. Ryan Benoit currently the minus 115 favourite. The comeback on Nam at minus 105. I think it's lined pretty fairly, this fight. I do think the value is on the very slight favourite in Ryan Benoit. I like his qualities a little bit better. I think he's a slightly better fighter. He's going to be more active. I think he could still be developing as well. But again, it's one of those fights where if you have a strong read the other way on Tyson Nam, then that's 100% playable as well. So it's one of them close lines that you could play either way. I personally am just edging that value to Ryan Benoit. For where the line goes, I think it doesn't go too far. You know, we might see Ryan Benoit minus 120, minus 125 come fight night, but I don't think it'll be any greater than that. I would be surprised to see Benoit coming into plus money, though, you know, that money coming on Tyson Nam. In regards to the fight itself, I think we're going to have two strikers in this fight. I don't think this fight's going to hit the mat often, if at all. I think both guys are going to be swinging on the feet. I think Benoit is going to be moving in and out of range, trying to get a good read on Nam. I think Nam's going to be stalking him forward like he does all his opponents and looking to land one or two big shots. You know, his combinations aren't very long. Like I say, it's normally one big shot or a big 1-2, and then he'll reset and come forward again. But that's the problem I've got with Tyson Nam. I just don't think he throws enough volume, and I actually think we've got a decent fighter in Tyson Nam. We've just not seen it. And because we've not seen it, I'm not convinced he's going to be any different this time either. Albeit this is definitely a step down in competition for him. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Benoit, but at the time he fought Sergio Pettis was better than Benoit. Kai Kara France is better than Benoit. So it is a step down in competition, but I think Benoit is the better fighter. I think his striking's more crisp. I think he throws more, and I think he's going to be quicker to the punch as well. And I think his movement's going to be a little bit quicker, which could frustrate Tyson Nam. In regards to the wrestling, Benoit has got wrestling if he needs it. He's got takedowns. We've seen it before, and he's got decent grappling. I just don't know if he can win this fight via wrestling, via top control on Tyson Nam. I just don't see that type of fight playing out here. So as I mentioned, I think we're going to see a fight that takes place on the feet. I think Benoit's going to be the busier fighter, the more active fighter, the fighter that lands more strikes, and also the quicker fighter inside the cage as well. All those things should, in theory, see him get a win. So I'm picking Ryan Benoit to win this fight. And in this next fight, again, a newly added fight, we've got Jourdain Griffin versus Darrick Minner 2. These guys have fought previously. It was LFA 34, which was only 2 years ago. And before we get into that, we've got Jourdain Griffin, the minus 210 favourite, with the comeback on Darrick Minner at plus 175. I think the value is on the underdog at plus 175, I really do. And I know all fights can be different, but if you watch their first fight, there's no way you would think Minner would be a plus 175 underdog in this fight. As for where the line goes, I think that it is going to come down, because I just think people are going to be watching that fight and seeing that the line's massively off. I do think Darrick Minner is the rightful underdog for sure. It just shouldn't be this wide. I could see Minna coming down to maybe plus 125, plus 130. I do think it's going to come down that much. I'd be surprised if it went the other way. But how they match up, you got to look back at their first fight. Darrick Minna was absolutely dominating Jourdain Griffin in that fight for almost 2 full rounds until he got caught and submitted. He was taking Griffin down, looking absolutely solid in top control, submission attempts. If Griffin got back up, he'd get straight back to a takedown again and take him down. Griffin was remaining active, trying to sweep, trying to reverse position. Minna wouldn't let it happen. He was looking like a minus 300, minus 400 favourite at that point. Got into the second round, same thing again, took him down, controlled him. But then you start noticing Minna tire a little bit. And after one of the takedowns, Griffin stood back up. After they stood back up, he either looked a little bit tired or he might have been hurt from an elbow from Griffin, I'm not too sure. But he looked a little laboured, but then he got another takedown, which was great. And he started looking comfortable again as well. He's one of these types of fighters where even if he's tired on the feet, once he gets down to the mat, those cardio levels just disappear because that's their world, that's where they're most comfortable. And then shortly after that, there was a calf slicer attempt. Then Jourdain Griffin managed to secure an armbar from a very, very strange position and he tapped Minna out, unfortunate. But up until that point, Minna was totally dominant. The problem that we've got with Minna in this fight, though, is a lot of his fights play out the same. He seems to be dominating. He was taking Herbert Burns down. He was trying to submit Herbert Burns. He was comfortable against Herbert Burns. And then one mistake and he's submitted. It tends to be a common trend with Minna. And it wouldn't surprise me if the exact same thing happened in this fight. Minna comes out, first round looks great, second round looks great, starts tiring a little bit, starts labouring a little bit, and then gets submitted. It really wouldn't shock me at all. But considering what we saw in his last fight against Jourdain Griffin, then consider he's a plus 175 underdog. The value is absolutely with Minna. And I actually am putting a little bit of faith in Minna in this fight because if he can get through that third round, which is likely going to be the tough round for him, the round where he is probably going to be tired, if he can get through that round without getting submitted, I think he's going to beat Jourdain Griffin. Jourdain Griffin's takedown defense is borderline non-existent. He was losing that last fight to TJ Brown, who was debuting, until Brown put himself into a choke and ended up getting put to sleep. He was getting taken down by Chaz Skelly at will. He was getting taken down by Dan Ige at will. This is just a problem for Jourdain Griffin. He's got to figure out this takedown defense. Minna's going to be able to get takedowns, I think, whenever he wants. It's all about when Minna tires and what he does during that stage, that difficult stage for himself. But I'm going to put faith in the underdog here. I think Minna will ride this one out. I think he will get that revenge win. So I'm picking Darrick Minna to win the fight. And finally, we've got two newcomers. We've got Anthony Ivy versus Christian Aguilera. Anthony Ivy currently the minus 195 favourite. The comeback on Aguilera at plus 160. Now, I feel the value's on the underdog in this fight purely because the line is too wide, in my opinion. I think it should be much closer. In regards to line movement, I do think that we see the line closing through fight week into fight night. By how much, I'm not too sure. I think if it was to become too short, the hype on Anthony Ivy will start playing a factor. I think we'll start seeing money coming on him and that line widening up anyway. So I do think it'll come down a little bit, but I'm not sure to what extent it will come down. In regards to the fight itself, I think it's a good fight and it's a very interesting fight because we've actually got wrestler versus grappler, which is my favourite style versus style, because is the wrestler going to get submitted? Is the wrestler going to get reversed? Can the grappler stuff the takedowns? Can they get on top? What's the wrestler going to be like off the back against the jiu-jitsu player on top? It's really, really intriguing, and that's what we've got here. And in case you're unsure, it's Anthony Ivy that's predominantly the grappler. But what's interesting about Ivy is he's also got decent wrestling as well. And again, as I've mentioned 2 or 3 times already in this podcast, the one thing that's frustrating is when you see that grappler not look to wrestle, where Ivy actually does, and you can see he's put time into his wrestling, he's worked on it, and he does score takedowns. He scored takedowns in pretty much every single one of his fights, and that's why he's got a good record, because he's a good grappler that can wrestle. It's no secret, if you piece those 2 qualities together, you're going to be a great fighter. The issue I've got with Ivy, though, is as good as a grappler as he is, he loses some terrible positions for absolutely no reason. going from back mount to secure arm bars that aren't properly set up, to being in mount and just standing back up and letting your opponent up because you want to throw strikes at them whilst they're knelt down against a cage, flattening your opponent out, letting them back up. Honestly, the amount of fights that I watched of Ivy just giving away super good positions for absolutely no reason was just unbelievable to watch. And I think that's going to be a problem against someone like Aguilera, and this is ultimately why I'm picking him, not just because of the line, but because of the mistakes that he makes. Now, Aguilera is a good wrestler. He's got good takedowns, but when he's on top, he's solid, he's heavy, he doesn't make mistakes, he doesn't give you that chance for you to sweep, reverse, or get back up. It is going to be interesting in this fight because I don't think he's fought a grappler lately, at least, that's on the level of Ivy. But if he gets Ivy down, I'm not totally convinced that Ivy can sweep or reverse him because he's heavy on top. But if Ivy takes Aguilera down, I think that Aguilera will be able to find spots and holes to get back up and then shoot in on Ivy. So it's going to be a real interesting back and forth on the mat. The issue I have with Aguilera, though, is I think the dude's quite chinny. You know, he's been knocked out multiple times. He's seen him dropped multiple times in fights that he wasn't knocked out in. So although Ivy isn't necessarily a striker, he does hit hard. He's got nice elbows in the clinch, and he will throw some knees to the head in a Muay Thai plum clinch. So it's all stuff that Aguilera's got to be watching out for. It's a super interesting fight. Like I say, I can't look past the amount of good positions that Ivy gives up on the mat. And then when you consider that Aguilera is currently a plus 160 underdog, I think that looking at that style versus style and then mixing it in with the betting line, that's why I feel that you're getting the value on Aguilar, and that's ultimately why I'm picking Aguilar to win the fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it. And once again, guys, I'd appreciate all the likes to the video and subscriptions to this channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on. And as a long-term winning gambler over the last 3.5 years, that's going to come good for you. And we also cater for you fun gamblers too that like the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK. We have plenty of different packages for you guys to choose from, and they're all at really affordable prices too. So just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.